What's going on, you people? Today I'm going to be making a video that I've wanted to make for a long time. Should you buy this iPod Touch 6th generation in 2018? Now, Apple discontinued the sale of a lot of iPods a while ago, and they've also discontinued the 16 and 64 gigabyte versions of this device. You can now only buy 32 and 128 gigabyte, but that's not all bad because, 16 gigs, that's kind of out of the question for today. You're going to need at least a 32 gigabyte device if you want to have any photos, videos, or apps. But with that mentioned, let's start talking about the specs that this guy is rocking. So it's weighing So it has 3.1 ounces. So just looking at it, it's tiny. It's so light. It fits easily in the hand. You can use it easily with one hand and working really well. And we got an A8 chip, which is the same, I believe, that was in the iPhone 6. I'm certain it was the same one in the iPhone 6, which came out in 2014, and this came out in July of 2015. We got an 8 megapixel camera, which is certainly not Apple's best camera, but it's not horrible. But I'll show some pictures and videos that I took with this device later in the video. And you can get this thing in 5 colors. You can get it in space gray, blue, gold, which is the one I have here. I really like this gold color, pink, or silver. And let's talk about the processor. This is clocked at 1.4 gigahertz, 64-bit dual core, and it has an M8 Motion coprocessor with 1 gigabyte of RAM. The previous iPod Touch 5th generation only had 512 megabytes of RAM, but 1 gigabyte of RAM is also not very much in today's kind of society's demands because just 1 gigabyte, you're gonna definitely see a lot of app reloading, where apps, they're just gonna be reloading if you like to have lots of apps open at once. Let's say I got iBooks, all this stuff, even though I never use any of these. If you like to be doing lots of apps at once, you're gonna be noticing lots of reloading just because of the small amount of RAM. And it can record HD video with cinematic image stabilization, 1080p at 30 frames per second, and 720p slow motion recording up to 120 frames per second. Of course, the newer devices can have up to 240, and I don't even know if the iPhone 8 or 8 Plus have those either. The front camera is not great. It's 1.2 megapixels, and the latest iPhone 8 has a 7 megapixel front-facing camera, so definitely not Apple's best camera. And the front-facing camera can record 720p HD video at 30 frames per second. Connectivity-wise, you got 802.11a, B, G, N, A, and C Wi-Fi, and you have 4.1 Bluetooth, which is an improvement from the previous iPod Touch 5th generation. And taking a look at some Geekbench scores, let's just take a look at how powerful this device actually is. So I'm going to go to my history. I ran this benchmark earlier, and CPU, yeah. So as you can see, these numbers may not mean a lot to you if you don't know a lot about processors and stuff like that, but we had a 1338 single core score and a 2281 multi-core score. And just a comparison, we're gonna look at today's devices. Hold on, I gotta find today's real quick. So those numbers certainly don't compare a whole lot to today's standards. Looking at the iPhone 8, 8 Plus, and the iPhone X, certainly not the greatest specs, but you do have to remember that this was released in 2015. So what does this all mean for gaming? Well, because that's one of the main reasons that you would buy one of these iPod Touch devices. But to be honest, as you can see in this footage here, it can play these low-end games pretty well. And really not that much better than you would get out of one of the newer iDevices. However, in a second here, when you can see me playing PUBG Mobile, this is a very high-end game, and it's hard for this device to handle. Is it playable? Yes, but in a few seconds, in one of the clips in a second, you will see that there are lots of frame drops, and this is definitely going to be a problem for some of you. But keep in mind, this is such a high-end game, and it's kind of a miracle that it can be running on a device like this in the first place. And just keep that in mind, because that's going to be a problem for a lot of people. And as you can see in this clip, it can't even play Fortnite mobile because of the lack of RAM. And because this only has 1 gigabyte and you need at least 2 gigabytes of RAM to play it to play Fortnite. So gaming is overall, though, pretty good. Okay, so now I want to talk about the camera. Now, this is a mixed bag and is going to be a problem for a lot of you. The camera is only 8 megapixels, and the front-facing camera is only 1.2 megapixels. So definitely not Apple's best camera, but I do talk a little more in a second in the video that I'm about to show. But overall, the camera is not terrible, but definitely not Apple's best camera, and definitely not the best camera on a smartphone. But just listen to what I have in a second. So here I am taking a quick video on the iPod Touch 6th generation, and in good lighting conditions, even though this is only a 1.2 megapixel camera, you can actually get some pretty decent, the quality is actually really not that bad. And of course, you'd be getting a 7 megapixel camera on a modern iPhone like an 8, 8 Plus, or X, but really, when it comes down to it, the specifications don't really matter. What matters is what's actually noticeable by the user, and quite oftentimes it's not noticeable. Unfortunately, however, when we do get into lower lighting conditions, the drop in quality is definitely noticeable, especially when zooming in. This is pretty terrible, and if you got a newer iPhone or newer iPad, it is definitely something you'd notice would be a lot better. So it's just something to keep in mind, and there are plenty of other videos on YouTube that have been filmed with this device. So if you ever want to see, just go ahead and look there. Now I want to talk a little bit about pricing. As you can see, I'm on Amazon.com, and for a brand new one, it would cost you about $210. But remember, that's only for the 16 gigabyte model. If we go to 32 gigabytes here, the price has now gone up to $250 about. If I move it up to 264, come on, the price has now gone up to over $300. Now, if I go to the 128 gigabyte, and keep in mind 128 gigs, that is a lot of storage. That is the most storage you're probably gonna need. Like with the newer iPhones, you can get 256, and then soon it'll be 512, and oh my gosh. But the most expensive this is gonna be is $340. That really isn't bad if you compare it to the new iPhones and iPads. The iPhones, the iPhone X, that's $1,000 right there. That is gonna put a big dent in your wallet. But right here, you see this, the pricing for this really isn't that bad. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And you can find ones used on eBay for even cheaper than that. And remember, this $340, that's for the 128 gigabyte version too. So pricing, especially, essentially for this, you're getting an iPhone without the phone. You can even text with iMessage, so you can text people that use Apple devices. So with this, you're getting an iPhone without the phone and SMS text messaging, plus a few minor setbacks, such as not being able to view your battery percentage. But I do have an app for that, by the way, called Battery Percent, which will allow you to put a widget and be able to view your percentage. So anyway, but there are a few things that this lacks that the iPhone would have, but other than that, you're essentially getting an iPhone without the phone. So what's my final answer? Would I, if I didn't have my iPhone 6, which I'm currently using to film this video and use as my personal phone, would I go out and buy one of these devices? Well, here's the thing. It really depends on what you need it for. If you want a device that can watch YouTube and play games, surf the internet, listen to music, and you don't need super high graphical performance, speed, or camera, and or things like that, then I would go with yes. My biggest issue with this is the screen size and the battery. The battery is out of the questionably horrible. Have I used this for years? Yes, I have. But the thing is, if you buy one of these devices, you're going to be using it for at least a few years. At least I would hope. And if it's that bad, then it's probably not worth buying. But if you want to play Fortnite, if you want to play PUBG Mobile, if you want a device that can do high-end games, and we're talking about like real multitasking, graphical camera performance, I'm gonna go with no. Just because, well, this can't even play Fortnite, like I mentioned, because of the RAM issue, and even if it could, it would run not at all. And you saw the frame rate dropping in PUBG Mobile, so I would, in that situation, go with maybe one of the higher end iPhones. And even if it's like a 6S or 6S Plus, those are still good phones today. The iPhone 6 is still a good phone today, and I don't care what Apple says about the iPhone 6. It is a good phone today. But, yeah, guys, that's basically it. So, it's really up to you. You know, definitely watch the video. As, old as this device is, it really is not a bad device, especially today. So, it survived a long time, and just the screen size is really my only issue, that and the battery issue. But yeah, guys, definitely look at some other videos and specs before you see if you want to actually go out and buy this. Thanks, guys. I'll see you in my next video.